welcome to the Lifestylist, John.
Doug, I'm glad to be here, Luke. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
man, I'm really excited to talk to you. I was trying to remember today how I came across your video, What Men Crave, I believe is the title of it, right? It's
Yeah.
like a short video, maybe 11 minutes or something.
hmm
And I still to this day I can't figure out how I found that video, but I sat there and watched it and I thought, What Men Crave? I'd like to know, if this guy's on point. And it was like, everything you said rings so true to me that I think I shared it with like every woman I know. It's like I'm like texting the link around, like watch this, especially the ones that are single and frustrated about being single. I'm like, just
Right.
do what this guy says, and
Right.
and I got a great response. And one of your biggest fans, at least of that talk, is my show producer Tati, who you've been emailing with, and she was like, "Oh
Oh,
my God, I love this guy! I can't wait for this interview." So
oh, that's great.
yeah, so that's kind of the direction I wanted to go with you. Being a man, obviously myself, as are you, and consider myself to be at least on the road to becoming more of a conscious man,
Mm.
meaning that I have access to kind of both sides of my energy, my personality, the masculine and feminine. I
Right.
would say producing a podcast is mostly feminine. It's a very creative outlet, and it has a lot to do with empathy and communication and
Mm.
all of that stuff. So I'm kind of in the creative flow zone right now, but I find that in my life and relationships that, especially in relationships, that more of the masculine energy tends to serve. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into all of this.
Sure.
Before we start, what's new in your life right now that you're excited about? What do you have going on in terms of your coaching or business? Like, what's the most rad thing that you've got going on in your life?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm teaching a weekend next weekend with another co-teacher of mine. I teach with Guru Jagat, who you know, a woman named Kendra Kunoff, who comes from this authentic relating world. So we're teaching a weekend where we bring men and women together to practice the things that I talked about in that video. Like how do you hold structure for a woman so she feels safe and can relax? And how do you move energy through your body, in a way that makes him delighted to be alive? And it's a concept, an esoteric concept, but it actually, embodiment practice actually takes those concepts and like puts them into the world so that people can feel it and they can look at a guy and say, wow, that's a deep man, or that's a present man, or that's a fiercely loving man or woman. And so we practice embodiment like you'd practice yoga, you
Do
know?
you? That sounds like an amazing workshop. Do you have to bring your own partner with you?
No, no, no. We have. I'd say half are singles, or two-thirds are singles, and
That's funny
two
when you when
people.
you
Yeah.
started to describe that. Full disclosure, like this is the issues that I have. It's I'm like I've been working on myself spiritually for 20 years, like nonstop. I'm very committed to growth,
Mm,
but relationships and intimacy and stuff are something I'm realizing I need a lot of work in that
mm,
area still. And when you started talking about that, I could feel my intimacy fears like erupting. I was like, oh my God, I'm scared already to like sit across from a woman. And I thought, well, if I know her, maybe, and then I'm thinking, oh shit, just walk in there and like pick a partner or have them
mhm.
pick you, and you start like really being open like that. I'm realizing, yes, I probably
Yeah.
need many workshops like that.
Well, the beauty of it is that people who don't know us can experience us fresh in that moment. Right? There's no history, right? There's no you always or you never. So they're just feeling you, going, okay, like I feel like this guy needs to breathe deeper. I feel like this guy needs to get his shit together around money. Like it's amazing what we can feel, especially if we do a little yoga and we breathe and we open our bodies. It's amazing what you can feel. And so, yeah, the talk came from many years of working in this arena and seeing so much about what women were talking about. Women have gotten very good at saying, "Here's what I want," but men are still like you're talking about, man. We're a little stifled about it. Either we demand it in a way that's weird, or we don't. We hide it.
So that sounds like a really amazing workshop, but I have to admit, like, if I'm really honest, I just felt my intimacy fears like flare up. Just the idea of getting in a room with a bunch of very conscious women and conscious people and being open and vulnerable like that. I've had a couple similar experiences, like at going to White Tantric, like a
hmm
Kundalini yoga insane workshop, and you really can go deep with someone. And even in some of the other like nighttime workshops in that yoga practice where you're really allowing someone to see you,
Yeah.
in a meaningful way, especially in a group full of people, can be a little bit daunting for someone who, has been somewhat reserved and closed off in some respects.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a training of our nervous system to be open, right, in front of somebody, to be a little nervous, but still stay open, keep our bodies open, our heart open, and stay connected, right? So the idea of workshops like this, and my training has been 8 years in working in this world, is that you train your nervous system to stay open while in intimacy, right? So many, we're trained to look away or break away or shake off the energy or giggle or touch habitually. And the idea is that you can get much deeper at working with somebody who doesn't know you, because they don't know, they don't know how you, look in the morning, and they don't have any history with you. And so it's actually a really deep way to get feedback on how the world experiences you, but you never get, by tantric, for example, right? You do this really deep practice, but she's not saying at the end, I would have needed you to breathe deeper or look more fully into my eyes or not fidget, or she doesn't say the things that she would need in order to feel you deeper as a man.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
very true. That's very
yeah,
true. Yeah, yeah. There's no dialogue or feedback necessarily.
yeah. So it's a sacred commitment to each other. Like, I'm going to tell you what I would need to feel you most as a woman or as a feminine being. It doesn't have to be man, woman, right? And they're going to tell us, like, here's what I would need to trust you more, or, be able to surrender my heart to you, or, let you lead me somewhere. And that's invaluable feedback,
That's
and
very
often
cool.
surprising. Yeah.
What's
Often
the
very
date of
surprising.
that workshop? I wonder if I'm going to be in town still.
Yeah. It's the 20, come as my guest. It's the 21st through the 23rd. It's next week.
Oh man, I'm going to be in New York.
Oh,
I would like to come to
I'll
another
have,
one though. That sounds very cool because you're right. I've had those experiences and there is no like feedback loop. It's like the space
mm,
opens up, and I'm thinking of like a workshop I did with Tage actually, who a Kundalini teacher here in town, and it was one of the exercises in the workshop where you did some crazy kriya and some breathing, and you sat across from someone and you just eye gazed with them, locked eyes, and I was with this woman who was an older woman, and it was so interesting because I really just made myself, I just found the courage somehow to really, really hold space with her and just look in her eyes. I didn't divert my attention. I didn't fidget. I didn't do anything to distract myself or escape from the sort of maybe discomfort that I felt on some level of just being that open and intimate. As we stared in each other's eyes, like I just started bawling, and then she started bawling, and it was so crazy, dude. And you guys, whoever's listening, that half the time, people think I'm nuts. I think on my podcast, but I'm just real. This is me. But what I could see was this immense pain in her. I mean, I
mm,
started just having this empathy that opened up, and it was so
yeah,
profound.
yeah,
And then a few days later, and then, that was it. Then the exercise was over, and, we just gave her a hug, and I never got to know her or anything like that. And then a few days later, her friend came to class, and she was like, "Hey, are you Luke?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, my friend came here the other night, and she can't stop talking about you and this experience she had with you. She's going through a divorce. She was just like a complete emotional disaster, and just having a really hard time emotionally. And when you guys did that exercise, she just felt this immense healing energy, and she said like things
yeah.
totally shifted for her in that moment, and she's just like obsessed with you. I mean, not obsessed with me in a
Right,
way that
right,
she ever
right.
wants to meet me or anything like that, but just obsessed with that experience that we shared together.
Hmm.
It was really profound. And that just goes to show what can happen when you have two humans that are courageous enough to kind of really open up, and having a structure put in place where that can happen,
Right,
which sounds like
right,
what you're doing, which is cool because I'm
right,
not going to do that. Like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to come record a podcast. I'm just going to do my thing. And I'm going to probably
right,
avoid that level of intimacy at
right.
all costs unless I insert myself into a situation in which someone like you is facilitating that opening.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not unusual for men. The masculine tends to be very purpose driven. The feminine tends to be very driven by connection, like my feminine, your feminine, just the feminine, not necessarily man and woman. But so when you are in your masculine, going to the gym, doing your, podcast, doing your thing is what your primary focus is. Well, when I do these workshops, I almost inevitably 80% are the women first, right? Because the feminine is naturally I think women are just suffering a lot in relationship as well, and like you're talking about, men don't actually know how to show up in a way that you know is safe and feels comfortable and is, I don't know, I want to use the term masculine, but just kind of owns the um, just the nobility of being a man, right? The part of us that wants to take care of them, that wants to keep them safe, that is present, isn't on our iPhone, that feels into their heart. You just probably, really saw her more deeply than she'd been seen for years, and that's a very nourishing thing for people, man and woman, right?
It was
And
a
those moments are awesome. Those are the
yeah, it
moments
was a
that I love.
powerful experience. Yeah, it was it was actually, I grew a lot because I saw that, even though it's probably lasted maybe 15 minutes or something like that, but I saw that it's like I felt safe. I wasn't going to be hurt by being that vulnerable.
Yeah,
And it also showed me like, wow, you really have issues, because there's like, I have so much apprehension about being that close with someone. And then of course that started to reflect into past relationships. And I can see like, God, I thought I was really opening my heart in so many different situations. And it's like, no, there was still like a pentagon wall
yeah,
between my heart and that person's heart. But it was maybe as open as I had been before. So it seemed very open, but as time goes by, the context for that and the capacity to be open starts to expand, and you see like, oh no, I was totally still shut down.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. So you touched on something there in terms of men. I feel like in today's age, we don't really know what to do. It's like we don't know how to act. And coming from the context of my life, I was raised by like a very masculine, feminist woman, right?
Right.
And so I was sort of, and I'm not placing any blame. I love my parents. I love everything good and bad that's ever happened to me. It's all made me who I am. I've totally made peace with that. But masculine energy was very much discouraged,
Mm, mm,
And then I had a dad who was like so polarized, like super uber masculine energy, with not turned on to the heart at all, and was like, just super into guns and hunting and rodeos, and was just like
wow.
an old school like man's man, like the epitome of like the Marlboro man, just
Right.
a
Right.
real tough customer. And so I really feared the masculine, and I didn't want to be like him. And then the messaging that I got from mom was like, men are bad, they're all assholes, they're not to be trusted, all they do is hurt you, and this kind of stuff. Don't be like them, don't be a jerk. So I was sort of conditioned to be very feminized and be kind of people pleasing and sort of like more of a doormat, very timid, shy, afraid. And then through my own evolution and growth, I've had to kind of find more of a balance where I can access that strong masculine energy. But I find that guys in their 30s, and me, I'm in my 40s, that in our culture, we're very confused about how we're supposed to relate to women,
Mm,
because many of us have been grown up and had that other part of us shut down, right? Like
mm.
myself. I mean, it's so many guys with my story where
Yeah.
they have a big
Yeah.
heart and they're a good guy, but they don't want to be the feminine in the relationship. They want to be
Yeah.
the man in a relationship. But it's almost like, it's like you can't you can't win. It's like you pay for dinner, you open the door, and then you're like a chauvinist, but you don't do that, and then you're an asshole who has no respect for women. I mean, it's just like, it becomes very confusing
Yeah.
entering into like dating and relationships and stuff today, because it's like you don't know what's expected of you. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not given, and we're not taught this. Like we're taught to do those things, like take care of, get a good job. I call it the myth of the good husband, right? Where you take care of her, you show up, you support her dreams or her desires professionally, or you're a good father, and yet she's still unhappy or there's still something missing in the relationship. And yeah, that's where a lot of guys are at, and women are just as confused because they have this polarity too, where I want a man to take care of me in some way. Like I don't need a man to take care of me. I can have a kid by myself. I can make my own money. I can, totally take care of myself, and yet my heart wants to be taken care of. The feminine. So women are having this issue. It's kind of a post-feminist blowback, really, and finding that balance, in between, where you can be a killer, you can own your killer, in service of love, right? You can own your killer in service of, in service of doing something beautiful in the world, right? And most men, a lot of men that I know, because I'm close to you in age, a lot of men coming from the 70s and 80s, growing up in the 70s and 80s, didn't have strong masculine role models. And so we didn't know. Like, I was raised by all women. I had a mom, an aunt, two stepsisters and two sisters. So I didn't have any idea what it was like to be a man. I had to figure it out on my own. So yeah, both sexes are confused. We're trying to feel through it and show up in this way that's not feminist anymore, but it totally honors the feminine. It's not, men aren't just in touch with their feelings to the point where they can't hold space for a woman. And there's a lot of paradoxes that we're walking here. And the art, right, because I would consider it like the art of intimacy, is in walking that fine line, right, between owning that part of yourself that would ravish a woman with the deepest part of your heart, right? But would do so while she feels totally safe, while she trusts you completely. And I think both sexes are craving that, right? Men are craving surrender, like I talked about. Women are craving a man they could trust, right? And so here we are trying to do this dance in the 21st century, and that's why I have a job. It's a growth industry, Luke. I'll tell you, man. This is not going away.
Well, I also notice, because I've worked in the fashion industry for a long time, and so I've primarily been surrounded by women, and so I hear them talk, and I'm sort of just sitting back in the cut, like listening. Okay, cool. And a lot of the time, I happen to be the only straight guy around too, even if there were other guys around. So I was privy to a lot of girl talk, and I've noticed over the years that most of the women, at least in this culture, like in Hollywood, seem to be very frustrated. And it stems from two things. It's like they want to make money, they want to have a career, they want to kick ass, they want to be a girl boss, hashtag girl boss.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic because the world needs more of that energy, I think, right? And women are capable of just a totally different approach to business and projects and company culture and things, which is fantastic. But I heard a lot of frustration in them because, quote, and I'll just quote them, I'm trying to date all these guys and they're all pussies. It's like, I don't think women want a guy who's like a people-pleasing doormat. They want a strong guy, but they also don't feel like they need a man to pay the bills and to eat. They have their own career. They're exercising their own power out in the world and being very proactive. But they want to come home and now be a girl. It's like they don't want to come home and run shit. They want to come home to a man that can hold that kind of space. And
they want to be led.
Right. Yeah. And so I don't know. It's just like, I think we're at such a weird impasse now where it's like both parties are both trying to figure each other out. And it's so frustrating, and then the other side of it is me as a man and living in Hollywood in this culture. I find it exceedingly difficult to even meet women that are in tune with their feminine energy at all. And when I do, it's like, oh my God, it's like you've struck gold. You just chat a girl up at coffee or something and you go, whoa, you can't even believe she is in touch with her feminine energy.
Right.
That she's feminine and she's being open and receptive and intuitive and creative and all those wonderful attributes of that feminine energy. It's like, you actually can't believe that you find it. Now, in other places in the world, in other cultures, I found it to be more prevalent. But here, there's a lot of competition, and as a man, when I'm being in an interaction with someone who's competitive, it's like the attraction is instantly nullified.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's no polarity. It totally turns me off.
Yeah.
I'm trying to extrapolate a question from that. I think I'm just like expressing my profound confusion, and it's like, what do we do? Like, here I am, I'm a masculine guy who's in touch with my feminine. I'm conscious. I want a feminine woman. I'm single right now, so in my life, that's what I want. I want a woman who's very much in touch with that. I don't care like how tough she is and how much money she makes and how much she kicks ass in the world. If she does that, great, good for her. But I don't want that at home. I want like a nurturing kind of open heart,
So does she. Like, almost the women who want that most are the women who are the most powerful hashtag girl bosses around. So many people that I work with, women mainly, are in that, where I don't want to come home and then lead my man, but he's not stepping up. Well, there's a biofeedback loop, that goes on where he wants to lead, but she doesn't trust his leadership, so he kind of holds back, and then she hates him, and then, you know what I mean? And then there's this whole thing where then he just like, I can't make you happy, or, this is the Crave masculine, claim, like, I do everything, I can't make her happy. So the way that I'm looking at this is it's a question of learning how to lead as a masculine partner in relationship. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do women really want? And, if I did another talk, it would probably be, what women are craving. And
well,
I'd catch a lot of shit. I'd catch a lot of shit for that too. But that's okay. Somebody's got to step up and start saying.
Well, this show, John, is all about catching shit, and I am probably the most politically incorrect person that I know in my circle of friends, because I just think it's gotten ridiculous. Everyone's just too goddamn fucking sensitive, and no one can express their truth. And so I'm not about concealing that. And if somebody clicks stop or delete or unsubscribe on my podcast, I'm totally cool with that, because I have to just keep it real. So in broad terms, and let's, of course, be mature and intelligent about this. Of course, there are different men and there are different women, and there's varying degrees of masculine and feminine, and there's gay people, and there's all sorts of different, options for us as humans, right?
Right.
But we can speak kind of in generality. So in a general way, based on the people that you work with and the workshops you do and all this stuff, what is it that I'm expressing that women want and that they're unable to find in this culture?
Yeah. Well, that's a huge question, and I, of course, can't speak for all women. I'll do one or two disclaimers here. But I especially a modern woman who is empowered. It's mainly heteronormative, what I'm going to say, but of course this is same-sex relationships, all relationships, right? So for there to be intimacy, right? Intimacy is, we're the same. I'm human, you're human. I have fear, you have fear, right? I want to love, you want love. Like, that creates intimacy in that moment, recognizing our sameness, right? But what creates sexual polarity, which is where most relationships go awry, is we're different, right? The masculine craves more nothingness. My masculine, your masculine, her masculine, everybody's masculine craves more nothing. The feminine craves more fullness. So what women are craving is men who can rest in stillness and be the witness to all that they have to bring, right? Now I'm going to speak in generalities, but you'll get the texture of it. So that requires us to be in our bodies. That requires us to be grounded. That requires us to stop living from here and start living from here, right? So be embodied.
For those on the audio and not seeing the video, he's referencing getting out of your head and dropping down into your heart space.
Yeah, into your gut too. Like, so not just the heart, because that has a different energy, but your heart and your gut, that's fierce love. So what women are craving is fierceness, right? Coupled with love. What women are craving is a man who can tell her what he wants and what he thinks needs to happen. What women want is a man who doesn't need them but desires them deeply.
Ooh, so, that's good. That's a tweetable, dude.
Yeah.
That's a really good statement right there.
Yeah, I'm not on Twitter, but yeah.
That resonated. I'll put it on Instagram.
Yeah. They want a man who just desires them and worships them to some degree, worships the beauty of their entire feminine, the part of them that rages to the part of them that cries like a little girl and everything in between, but doesn't need them. Like, my life is so full. I'm so okay with who I am. I don't need you, but I really want you, and I want to take this journey with you. What women are really craving is men whose nervous systems are strong enough to handle that, which doesn't happen naturally. And most of us don't train. That's why I love Kundalini, because it's a great way to train our nervous systems. And when I lead a lot of men's groups, and when I lead men's groups, I have these guys do ego eradicator every day. I have them do things that train their nervous system, not because they need yoga, but because their nervous system needs to be strong enough to handle a woman's all, right? And
and sexually too.
They're totally
You
related.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
that's what it's a total different tangent. I don't want to sidetrack you, but that
yeah,
was a strange, after 5 years of doing Kundalini yoga on a very regular basis, that was a totally unspoken side effect
yeah,
of the ability to really channel that and control that sexual energy. It's really,
absolutely.
really strange. I had no idea that it was even happening. And then I started to notice that. So, yeah, so carry on.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of, without getting too esoteric, but they're craving men who have depth, right? They're craving men who have, yeah, who are deep enough to not get blown over by, whether or not somebody liked their Instagram post, or, um, they want a man who can feel, that we're going to die soon. Like, life is short, right? So why not love fully, right? And they want a man who can say what he needs, right? Who can cleanly and clearly say what he needs, and without closing, without collapsing. And that requires us to not judge what we need from ourselves, right? So men have to, like, first be okay if they're needy or jealous or whatever the thing, and be able to communicate that. So all of these are skills that can be learned and practiced. And in relationship, money is not really there anymore. Like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, there was still a thing, a little bit of a security connection where the man would make the money and you'd stay in a relationship because you needed that. Now, that's not needed. So what women are finding out is like, whoa, okay, well, I don't need his money. So what would I surrender to? What would I trust so much in this guy that I would surrender my heart? And they want, more than anything, a man who is deeply connected to a purpose that's greater than himself. That's not just about, you know, the bullshit, right? And
And with that man being connected to his purpose, I like that, because that's in my own experience, if I've ever allowed the relationship or the woman in my life to take
mm,
the first position of
mm,
priority,
mm,
it's fallen apart.
mm,
It's like it's a paradox, because you'd think, oh no, my girl comes first, my wife, my girlfriend, they're number one in my life, but
they're
I
not.
can't do that. Like, my mission in life has to be number one, and then they might be second or third. And I think I don't have a family, like kids and stuff, but I have a feeling it would even be true there. And my mission, meaning, I guess, it's difficult to ever say this without these highly triggering words, but my relationship with God, or relationship to source or the universe or my higher self, like, not my mission, like, oh, I'm running a business, not that mission, but my true mission being embodied here on earth, which is to evolve. Like, that's my number one highest priority. And that's what I have my number one relationship with. And
Right.
if I sacrifice that to make someone, well, woman or not, happy, I become immediately weak. And that, in my experience, has become repulsive to the woman that I think wants that.
It's that's the paradox. That's the paradox, right?
Right?
Right. So yeah, so she wants you to be absolutely on mission, right? But when you're with her, you're just with her, right? So part of masculine leadership is being able to create these containers. Like, baby, I'm gonna only be able to see you for 2 hours this week, but Saturday from 6 to 8, you and I are gonna get together, and I'm all yours. And really showing up for that, and that that kind of presence and integrity, um, women respect, and they crave it. Like, they're literally starving for it. So we've kind of gotten into this position where women are withholding their feminine gifts, men are withholding a lot of their masculine gifts, and so now we're kind of like just like quietly malnourishing each other. In this way that, where you can just feel it over the course of years, people just feeling more and more malnourished. Like the girl in the coffee shop, like that nourished you. You were like, whoa, like, it's good to be alive. Like, and all she did was smile and, and emanate light. Right? So it's much simpler than I think we know. How deep relating is so much simpler than I think we know. But it does take resting in and practicing a set of skills that we wouldn't normally know to practice. Which is why I think, I mean, the fact that video went as viral as it did shocked the shit out of me, because, I was talking to a room of women, basically. And I certainly did, when I put that up. In fact, I held on to it, a little story about this. I held on to it for 6 months because I was like, I don't know, this is a little edgy for me to put out there, and there might be a little bit of a shitstorm, but I put it out and I was just shocked as anybody. But what it told me is how much women want to hear that stuff. Like they want to hear a man sit up there and go, here's what I want from you. Here's what I'm going to demand from you in service of love. And that's why women, more than anybody, I mean, I appreciate you liking it, but I'd say 80% of the, mail I get is from women.
Wow, that's cool. Well,
Yeah,
I could tell
yeah,
in the audience, you can hear the women cheering and clapping, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the same feeling I had, and why, I was like, I got to find this guy, I got to reach out, because it's like you gave voice to something that I think a lot of us as men have a hard time expressing. It's like, yeah, this is what we want, and if you as a woman or women are able to provide this, which I think like ultimately my takeaway from that, and just what I've boiled down in my own life, what I really want from women in general, and especially the primary woman in my life, is I just want respect.
Mm,
It's like one word.
mm.
And if I get that, the world is your oyster. I mean, it's like I will literally, when a woman respects me, I get a feeling like I would take a bullet for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm immediately ready to fucking go into a burning building and get them out. It's like that's
Right.
all I need, And I think what your message in that video and what we're talking about here kind of conveyed, that was the underlying principle there, was just like men want respect, but also we need to be inspired as well, right? You can't just
Right.
have like a doormat woman that's like, oh yeah, I respect you here, honey. I've got my apron, I'm cooking you dinner, and I'm just not
Right.
going to talk. It's like, we
Right.
don't want that either. We want to be challenged, but in that challenge, whether say there's an emotional storm and, it's a test from a woman, is like, can we hang and be present for that? Yeah. Challenge me, but there
Yeah.
has to be respect.
Yeah.
And I think maybe on the woman's side, the respect comes from having an open heart. And on
Yeah.
my side,
Yeah.
perhaps I wouldn't even call it respect, but my cherishing of a woman's feelings and her safety and her sacredness comes from my open heart. Would you agree, or is there a way to state that from your point of view?
Y- Yeah. I mean, I think respect is such a huge thing for men, right? I like the word devotion, right? Because, and it's masculine and feminine. Women are craving devotion too, but there's something around, there's something really nourishing for a man to feel a good woman devoting her heart, like having faith in him and what he's bringing in the world, because a man on purpose is literally trying to take his consciousness and his depth and manifest it in the world. That's what this podcast is. This is you manifesting your depth in this mission, this purpose, talking to people about these kinds of things. And so having a woman who's devoted to that part of you in some way, that kind of thing is even, I think, one layer deeper than respect. Like, not only do I respect him, but like I devote my heart to his nobility and his mission, right? That, I mean, I know you feel
That's
that.
good. Yeah, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
resonating with that.
fuck,
I'm
man. I
like,
mean, we die for that. We would take a bullet for that for sure. Yeah,
yeah, it's funny. I'm like going, Luke, you're selling yourself short. It's more than just respect. I mean, I guess that's just a baseline, and
totally.
and of course, in order to get that, one has to have developed a character that's worthy of that respect. I mean, there was, for many years in my life, I don't think I was necessarily the type of person that demanded or warranted that kind of respect. That's the thing. But devotion, man, that's huge. That totally, I'm seeing that. I'm resonating with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you're right. We have to deserve it. We have to earn it. I mean, I don't think a woman should give her heart or give her devotion to any man that she doesn't trust. If you're smoking pot every day or whatever, I mean, not that I judge people who do that, but if you're doing something that numbs you all day long, how much devotion are you really earning, right? It's not, there's a certain level of presence and character that I think we as men hopefully will inspire in each other, challenge each other to, and that women will trust and they will want to follow that, in our own way. And I think part of what women are learning is, I don't want a best friend in my relationship, right? That's a big thing. Like, oh, I want him to be my best. No, you don't want him to be your fucking best friend. You want him to lead you powerfully and not take any of your shit and trust you when you lose your shit on him. And you know what I mean? Like, you want a guy who's gonna stand like a mountain and make you laugh every day, right? And that's not necessarily your best friend.
That's yeah. Well, that goes back to I think the real issue that we're having is you mentioned like the hangover or the backlash from one of those waves of feminism, right? Is this idea that we're the same.
Yeah.
That's my best friend, like my homie, we're exactly the same. And that's
Yeah.
why we're best friends. But that's not what I'm looking for in a relationship. I
Yeah.
don't want someone that's the same. I want someone that's equal, but I
Right.
want them to be as different as universally and humanly possible because I want that polarity. Like I want that just
Right.
absolute feminine energy because it's the opposite of what I predominantly am and have, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, who wants a best friend? I mean, that's like, that makes me feel like a pussy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like,
There's
you know,
no fuck in that.
forgive
Yeah,
my
there's
language
no,
here, but like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to be best friends with a girl. Like that's the friend zone. Ooh, gross. I mean, that's like the most unsexy paradigm of a relationship I could have
Right.
with the woman that I want to be intimate and romantic and sexual with is like, no,
Right.
we're not besties, dude.
No.
We're like co-conspirators, man. We're like in the trenches together side by side and in celebrating our differences, not trying to be the same. Because that sameness is competition, right?
Well, it's that intimacy piece too,
Okay.
right? It's that intimacy piece, but there's no fuck. Like there's intimacy is beautiful, but there's no sexual polarity in sameness, right? It's that, the one caveat I'll make to that is that a lot of same-sex couples, they say, hey, what turns me on is the fact we are the same, right? And yet we are different energetically. So in same-sex couples, oftentimes that's not quite true. But in hetero relationships, yeah, I don't want my woman to be still. I want my woman to move and flow, right? And she
Yeah.
doesn't want me to move and flow. She wants me to stand like a mountain. She wants at least to be, not that you're rigid, but that your texture is one of solidness, right?
Integrity. Yeah.
Integrity. I don't want my woman
Yeah.
solid. I want her to flow
Totally.
like
That's
light.
so gross. Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
It's yeah. So
Yeah.
so it's just celebrating those things, and I think this is part of the hangover you mentioned. Is like we're not actually celebrating the things that are different that light each other up, and with feminism, I think what happened to a lot of men, and your story is a good example, is that we were overly feminized in the 70s and the 80s. So we've got 2 or 3 generations of guys who don't actually know what being a solid man is. Like, and you learn that from other men, right? So that's why one of my pet projects is I want to create 1,000 men's groups around the world. Well, the reason is because we can teach each other like what it means to be in integrity and what it means to have presence and what it means to really practice these leadership, right? To call each other out to be the best men we could be because I love you, right? Because you're a warrior and I'm not going to take anything less than the best you've got to offer me, motherfucker. So men can do that with each other, and if we do, then we tend to show up back into our relationships with that kind of like, yeah, I am solid and I do, I am going to show up for you. There's nobility.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Because you
Yeah.
just made me think of a couple of my close male relationships, like with one of my brothers and a couple friends. We've set up this paradigm in our relationships where we call each other on our shit. Like there's absolute accountability. If somebody's wavering in the crew, in the wolf pack, if someone's getting squirrely or fucking weird or
Right.
just having character defects erupt or, they're backsliding into their old ways, whether it be they're not handling money right or they're losing themselves in a relationship or they're going off into a toxic relationship, whatever it is that's like their red flag behavior, we really do hold each other accountable. I mean, my brother just sat me down a couple weeks ago and, I could tell there was something weird between us. And so I was like, dude, can we talk? I was like, there's like a cold vibes I'm getting from you. And he's like, yeah, we can talk. Here's what it is. Boom, boom, boom. And I was like, shit. I mean, I was just in a respectful and loving way. He pinned me to the wall and was just like, bro, what's up with that?
Yeah.
I was like, shit. And I had to own, this particular behavior that I'm not going into on my podcast. It generally speaking, it had to do with the way that I interact with money, and that's something I've been working on. And, he called me on some stuff and I was like, shit, dude, you're right. And it came from a loving place and there was an inherent level of respect. And I would also be happy to have that come from my female partner too, if it's done from the heart in a loving
Right.
and respectful way. If it's done
Yep.
in a mommy's criticizing me way, my
Yeah.
penis will shrivel up inside
Right.
my stomach and I will never touch her again.
Yeah. You don't want to fuck somebody. You don't want to fuck somebody who's criticizing you, both men and women, right? And you're right. But the thing, it's funny, we did a workshop here last night, and what men don't get, I don't think men and women don't get, is how much of her rage filled with love we can take. It's actually quite sexy. Like, I love you so much, asshole. I'm not gonna, you're a better man than this. And, that kind of thing from our woman is awesome. It's like a wake up call. It's like the Oracle in the Matrix. It's just like it stirs something in us. And I think the problem is that when women go there, they go into anger or rage, it's disconnected from the heart because it's connected to childhood wounds. All the men that haven't shown up, and all the men that haven't been present, and all the men that have been out of integrity. And when a woman can connect her heart to that pain, it's incredibly sexy and incredibly beautiful. But when they disconnect from that pain, we're like, whoa, no, it feels like an attack. And learning that yoga, this is back to the workshop, like this is the kind of stuff that you can learn. Like I didn't know that I could learn how to be angry but keep my heart wide open. Women didn't know it. I didn't know women would actually like that.
Yeah.
And they would actually expect it.
That's very interesting because it reminds me of a situation a few months ago. I was in a relationship, and the woman that I was in the relationship with felt hurt by some of my behavior, and she confronted me. And she confronted me in a way that was pretty harsh, and it was honest, but she was also respectful and caring. And although it was hard for me to just sit and breathe and not be, I didn't defend myself. I didn't deny. I just was like, okay, I'm being open to this. And I'd set up some parameters of communication where there was an appointment set aside. Like, all right, if there's a problem, don't just bum rush me. I'm a dude.
Right.
You're going to scramble my brain if you just get emotional on me out of the blue. She's like, hey, I need to talk to you. When would be a good time? Cool. We set the time. We sit down. So I'm ready. I've got kind of my armor on. And what she communicated made me feel defensive, but I didn't express that, and I just allowed her to hold that space. And you know what? It fucking turned me on because she was right. It's like, as much as I wanted to defend myself, she actually had a depth of wisdom that surprised me at the time. And I was like, shit, you could see that? I mean, her level of understanding was far beyond what I thought she was capable of at that point.
Oh,
And
they
it's
know.
like, yeah, I was like,
They know. Yeah. Yeah.
damn, girl. I was like, good for you, man. Like, I'm really impressed. You just called me out, but you did it in a way in which that I could receive it and I can hear it. It didn't come from wounds from the past. It wasn't some neurotic shit. It was like, no, dude, you're right. My behavior was out of line, and I own that. And you know what? I'm going to do everything I can to not repeat that again. And actually gave me so much more, not that I didn't have respect for her, but it was just like an added level of attraction, I guess you could even say. I was like, ooh, shit.
Value.
Yeah, she's on
She's
it.
valuable. Yeah. That's value for a woman and a man too, right?
Yeah, and the relationship was meaningful enough to her to like put some thought into it and actually come at me with, a meaningful observation or an issue to bring up.
Yeah. Well, if a woman can do that, and then also in the same discussion, like show you how her heart is broken by it or hurt by your behavior, that is even deeper for us, right? And so women learning to train their own nervous systems to express their hurt, right, and cleanly and respectfully, which is not easy sometimes in the feminine, because the feminine can be a storm, and that's cool too. But the more that we can feel your hurt when we're unconscious or when we make mistakes, the more that you're going to evoke nobility. You're going to evoke the best of us, right? And so we're constantly evoking in each other, right? If you come home and you're present and, with your love and you're present and your heart's open, even if she's in a shitty mood, eventually you're going to evoke her openness and playfulness and devotion, right? the problem is we don't hold that pose long enough. Most of us like try it for 30 seconds and then go, shit, I tried to be loving and she's being a bitch, or I tried to be loving and he's being an asshole. But if we hold that pose, like she came at you with like a very specific texture, and she evoked through your defensiveness, through whatever, the best you have. And we could be doing that with each other all the time if we really got present to it.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
that's
God, you're so
that's my
right,
mission.
because I'm thinking about, not only my reaction to that that confrontation, but what did I do with that information afterward? And you're absolutely right. The behavior that I was displaying immediately stopped, and there's just no way I could ever go back to doing that.
Mm.
I really,
Good.
really owned it and was like, oh, I'm never doing that, because look what happens, because she allowed me to see what was underneath the anger and the frustration, and it was hurt, and it was
Yeah.
legitimate hurt, because, I just was doing something unconsciously. It wasn't intentional, of course, by any means, but once I was able to see that, it was like immediately that stopped, and there's no way I would ever go back to, it just involved like boundaries with relationships and stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. No, I got it. Done deal. Like, you've got my word. In other words, it helped me to rise to the occasion and increase my level of integrity around the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. She invoked your nobility.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's very well
Whereas,
stated.
where she could have like not said anything, right? And then just been passive aggressive or bitchy about it or checked your email or whatever. We all do this, right? We all do this, right? She could have done that, and that would have evoked something totally different from you,
Yeah.
right? That would evoke something completely different. But because she had the presence and the depth to do that, she evoked something really, really great. And I guess that's the thing that I would, that's my mission, man, like to help people just do more of that. One conversation at a time, one relationship at a time, and that's
Uh,
my battleground.
That's awesome, man. I,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate it. I love the work you do. Yeah, it's really
Thank
great to
you.
be able to bounce this stuff back and forth, because I don't know, I don't know that many guys that necessarily want to go here. They want a solution, but they don't necessarily want to dig into the mechanics of it and learn. So
Yeah,
I'm like, I want to take every workshop you have. This is great stuff, man, because
yeah,
it's, I think as a man too, it's difficult to trust information like this. It's like, I don't think and I'm just thinking of the guys I know, like, we're not just going to go along with any guy like you that's like, oh, here's how you handle relationships and women. It's like, it's got to really feel right. We have to be able to discern the level of validity to an approach like this, because the consequences could be dire. I mean, if you have a
right,
wife and you listen to some knucklehead on YouTube that tells you how to handle your wife,
right.
and you misstep, you could lose custody, you could lose your house, you could lose the
Yeah,
woman of your dreams. I mean, it's like there's a lot at stake, so this stuff is very delicate.
of course.
And so I
Yeah,
think, it's important to talk to someone that your heart really resonates with, which mine is. So it's super exciting.
yeah.
So
The other thing you see this, and this happens in workshops, right? Is that you're listening to me and I say something, and then I say, hey, ladies, is this true? And you've got 5 or 6 or 10 women going, yeah. And so don't just listen to me, like, test this out with women or men in your life. And that's the nice thing about having conscious people around you, because you can listen to it and see it in a workshop setting or something like that, because then it'll land. If I just said you should do this, but if I say do this and it'll feel good for the women, and then the women go, somehow you're like, oh, ding, 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 ding. So
that
yeah,
is
yeah,
really affirming. Yeah, I
yeah,
recently saw the author John Gray speak, and I mean, his views are. I mean, some feminists really hate him because he's very much into the biology and into hormones, and he's like, "This is the way it is. This is the way we are." He doesn't, say, "Oh, I'm just generalizing. Don't get your feelings hurt." He's very unapologetic, and I like that approach.
right,
But he's saying, like, this is the way men are. This is the way women are. And after he gave his talk, I interviewed a lot of women. I was like, "All right, so what did you think? On a percentage scale, how much of what he said about how you guys are, how women are true?" And all the women were like, "Oh, 100%. He's totally on point."
mm,
And you
mm,
could tell, like you're saying, in the audience, the women are laughing and they're cheering when he says different things about, what their perspective is. And you're so right that it's very informative for us as men to be able to hear that feedback loop,
yeah, yeah,
because I don't think most of us are in the in the habit of walking around asking women like, all right, tell me your deepest feelings about what it's like to interact with the males in your life. It's like we just don't ask them that stuff.
No.
We sit there and like dumbasses and try to figure it out, you know?
We're still trained to kill the tiger. Like,
Yeah.
our brains are still 10,000, 20,000 years ago, right? We're still trained. We've got to kill the tiger, kill the tiger, kill the tiger. And that hasn't changed. Our reptilian brains have not changed much. So it takes something for a man, and it's going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4, 500 years, if the planet makes it with us, right? But we're going to start to change because now men are going to be in the role of supporting the rise of the feminine. 50 years from now, man, most of politicians are going to be women. Most doctors are going to be women. Most lawyers are going to be women. There's a shift happening. And so men are going to be in a supporting role, right? And that's going to be an interesting shift as we try to figure out, like, okay, what's our value going to be like now as the feminine is rising, and we're supporting that much more than for the first time in history, right? Unless you're part of an Amazonian tribe that's
Right.
maternal,
Right.
yeah.
So I wanted to ask you,
Hey Luke, before we do,
Yeah.
I'm having some issue with battery life here because I wasn't expecting to use this.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want us to cut off in the middle, so I have to plug in.
No, that's
here,
cool. Go
see
ahead.
see if I can make this work.
That's all good, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, without it being strange here. Oh shit. All right. Let me see. I may have to flip this. You
That's
can
okay.
edit this, yeah?
Yeah, we're gonna edit it. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I know the exact starting point when we start again too, because it's a
Okay,
specific
cool.
question.
All right. So let me make sure. Be a little bit. Is it more or less the same?
It's
Cool
fine.
enough? Okay, cool.
It's fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, how can a man? Well, actually, let me start that again. So we talked about how in the 70s and 80s, a lot of us men were emasculated, right? It's just kind of where we were in the cultural swing. So I've found my own ways, some better than others, of getting in touch with that masculine. I think personally the pendulum kind of swung a bit too far the other way at a point, and I sort of became a little bit harsh in some of my relationships and have had to learn how to find some more balance and just be more in charge of that. But say you have a guy who's identifying he's a nice guy, he's always in the friend zone, he's a people pleaser, he's very much in the feminine, can't assert himself and stand up for himself, and he wants to like rise up. How can a guy learn to do that? What are some principles he can apply without becoming a dick and like becoming hurtful and controlling?
Right.
Because I think that a lot of people have there's a polarized ends of that. Like either you're a total wuss or else you're like a macho gym rat guy who like disrespects women and is really mean, and you're controlling and jealous and possessive and all that kind of stuff. And I found for myself, I'm finding more of a sweet spot. But for a guy who's like super feminine energy, what might he do to assert his power without doing it in a way that's destructive to his relationships?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I get that question a lot. And there's a couple different answers. I'll give you sort of the men's work answer, and I'll give you the yogic answer. And the yogic answer is he can learn to drop into the lower part of his body. So the masculine energetic comes from just below the navel and below. So the more, have you ever seen Nine Inch Nails?
The band?
Trent Reznor.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Trent Reznor is in his legs the whole time, right? Like he's almost in a crouch, right? So he's naturally masculine, but it's because the energy of his body is in his lower body. Same with the martial artist. So just a way to drop is to start breathing into your belly. Most guys don't even know that's possible, right? So deep belly breath will literally lower your voice. It'll slow down, the mind, and it'll slow the sort of hum of your energy, right? And it'll be nourishing for a woman's nervous system. Does that make sense? The slower you breathe, the slower I talk, the deeper my voice, the more a woman feels my depth, and it actually nourishes and kind of caresses her nervous system. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Totally.
Yeah,
I love that.
And guys can practice that, can just start being that, right? So normally when guys are talking fast and they're, like a woman can't trust that. But the minute I start taking breath in between every sentence, and I slow it down, and I look you in the eye, and I feel my belly, maybe even feel my cock, feel my lower body, I'm dropping into my masculine. And I don't have to do anything special for that, right? Just train myself.
That's really interesting too, in that when a man becomes emotional, and I would say for me, my emotions feel centered in my head. They're definitely not in my lower chakras. It's like mental, frenetic, reactionary, emotional energy. And when a man expresses emotions, whether it be anger or any other emotion, especially the strong ones, they produce estrogen. I learned this from John Gray, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. And so you have, when you look at an angry man that's like, freaking out and hitting his chest and having a temper tantrum, you think like, oh, he's being masculine. No, that's actually an extreme expression of feminine energy.
Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
You know what happens? So the way women experience it is they experience us rising. They experience so what happens is as we get angry, the energy starts to rise, and pretty soon our head is red and our eyes are bulging out and our veins in our neck there's no ground. Right. Whereas I can be angry, but I'm still in breath, deep breath. I'm in my lower body. I'm literally pulling that anger back down into my lower body and into my heart. And then when I express it from there, it's got a whole different texture. I'll actually use different words because I've taken breath, right? I'll actually sound, and 90% of communication is nonverbal. So it's training our nervous system again as men. I think the number one trick I could tell men is train your nervous system to slow down and ground. And that happens in breath. Qigong is a great practice for that. Meditation is a good practice for that. And the second piece of that is awareness practice. I don't know if do meditation, Vipassana, or just where you're the witness. Man's relationship to the feminine starts with his relationship to his own thoughts and feelings, which are in constant motion, constantly. Well, there's a part of me that's never changed, that's infinite, that's consciousness itself, that is never going to change. Well, that part of me, witnessing the part of me that's constantly changing, is me resting in my masculine. The more I can do that day in and day out, the more women will actually feel me as masculine. Does that make sense?
Totally, dude. This is incredible.
Yeah. So these are basic fixes that anybody listening to this can just say, okay, well, I'm going to be the witness, right?
Dude, it's funny because when I asked you this question, I was like, I feel bad because it's kind of in my notes. I haven't really followed my notes. If you're looking at the video, you see me look up to the upper left. Those are my notes, and I don't really follow them. If an interview's going well and there's a spontaneity, I don't want to screw it up, but I'm like, I know there was a couple in there. When I asked you this, I was like, poor guy, this is like a rough question to answer, but you fucking crushed it on two levels there. So the first one being that, actually centered in your body, more of a physical expression of your masculine energy, which is down lower. And that brought up one thing I learned from a Qigong master who was an autistic chiropractor that I studied with years ago. And he taught me this body language thing about shaking someone's hand, and that when you go to shake someone's hand, you tense up your quads in your legs and your glutes. You kind of firm up your ass and your whole core, and you reach out your hand, and you can throw someone to the fucking ground if your lower half of your body's locked up like that. It's incredible. And it actually, it's such a different experience when you shake someone's hand like that than if you're all loose and noodly. It's like, ew. And so he showed me the contrast of the two handshakes, and furthermore then explained how when doing public speaking, when you first get out there to say, hey, so here we are tonight, and give your opening statement, that right when you announce yourself, you do that same thing where you firm up your lower body. And it's so amazing how you can project so much more power speaking, and you can immediately command the attention of an audience just by using your lower body like that. And I actually never made the correlation between, communicating with someone on a more personal level, especially when, say, a woman is really having an emotional moment and coming at you with this firestorm, and you don't want to get into a reactionary
Right.
place of also being feminine and crazy and, creating more drama. So that's a really interesting correlation there.
Yeah. Not to mention
Yeah,
sex, man. You know what I mean? Like the masculine
right.
power zone is right there, just below your navel. And having sex from that place, right? Sex happens in the lower body. So the more that
Right.
you've trained your lower body to like circulate energy and feel, breathe and be open, the deeper the sex. Just,
That's very
just
cool.
FYI, guys. I mean, if you want to become better lovers, like, breathe deep and work on your lower body.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's one last piece to that, if we have
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
totally. I
yeah.
love it, man. I mean, this is really good practical stuff for men and, and also, of course, for women too. I mean, I think my listeners are about 50-50 and there's a nice balance of the two. So, yeah, what's the other one?
Well, the last piece is more lifestyle. And most guys won't go this far, but this is the thing I would say. If a guy's relationship to the feminine is fucked up in any way, right? Either he's in friend zone all the time, or he keeps having the same relationship over and over again, or there's some kind of like habitual issue. My suggestion is you take 6 months and you just remove yourself from chasing the feminine, getting, acknowledgement from the feminine. You just remove yourself from the chase completely, and you bring all the focus to getting to know yourself, building a life that you're inspired by, having deep relationship with men. And in doing that, what happens is all of the ways that you're addicted to feminine approval or feminine energy, all these things start to become known to you because you start to go fucking crazy a little bit. But you're facing that death of, look, I'm gonna get to a place where I don't need a woman, where I'm so cool with who I am and what I'm making in the world and how beautiful life is, that when a woman is just a really beautiful manifestation of my depth. But most guys aren't willing to do that, to say, I'm going to take 6 months and I'm just going to, no Tinder, no flirting, like totally off. So that would be the last way. Guys who do that literally cleanse their palates and they totally reset their nervous system and come out of it much, much, much different.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I've noticed in my own life, I mean, I've done that many, many times. And for guys listening, if you're like, God, that sounds so hard, I think the easiest time to do that is after a breakup.
Totally,
You know?
totally.
When you get your ass kicked by
Yeah.
the fact that a relationship ended, that's a really good time to just step away because, I think not so much anymore, but when I was younger, if a relationship ended and there was pain, I would immediately be like wanting to just go out and get laid a lot. And that's how
Yeah.
I would try and heal that wound. And obviously we know the results of that aren't going to be positive in most
Yeah.
cases. So having found that to be ineffective, that's what I did, a couple of years ago. In fact, when a very substantial relationship ended, I didn't really date for probably a year, and it was the first time I'd had a real break like that. And it was very cleansing and did help me to kind of regain my power and become comfortable with myself. And I'd
Yeah.
also add to that, something I did too, is I went for the first time and lived by myself in my own place.
Mm, mm.
Always have had roommates, always lived with women or family or whatever the case may have been. And it's been really healing for me. I live here alone in this apartment where I have my studio, and it's like, it took me honestly about 6 months to feel comfortable. I mean, I would come home and it was just like, I need a cigarette, some sugar,
Yeah.
some sex, it's
Yeah,
just
right,
like
right.
all of my old go-to like dopamine,
Right.
spiking little triggers I would create, not that I was smoking. I quit smoking years ago, but it's just like, I need something to feel comfortable because I was so kind of lonely.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I was able to, it magnified how uncomfortable in my own skin I still was. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And
yeah.
then have just sort of force fed myself that solitude. And now it's like, dude, I come home and I love my roommate,
Right.
which is myself.
Hmm.
It's like, I just want to read and hang out and I play guitar and I work on my podcast and it's just super, super fun. So I might throw that as a piece of advice too, in that
Yeah,
kind of
for
solo
sure.
mission, is to maybe even consider, spending some time living by yourself.
Totally. I mean, it's, what you're describing, the way I describe it to guys, is that's your death training, right? Like being alone for a lot of men, is that like facing loneliness and facing, That's a vision quest, right? Like I'm going to be alone with myself. I'm going to get right with myself. All my demons, all my loneliness, all my grief, all that stuff comes up, and then you can face it like a man. And then when you return back to the feminine, they feel that you're a man who's faced death. You were, in that way, faced your own demons. And that just, you talk about respect. Like a man who hasn't done that, doesn't matter how much he's succeeded in the world, a woman won't respect him fully because she can feel he's not faced the parts of himself, certain parts of himself, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great, man. Yeah, the
yeah.
dark night of the soul. If you
Fuck
survive
yeah.
that, it does give you a certain level of depth, I think.
Yeah.
And also, in my own life, just having, like we all have our own degrees of pain, but I've been through some substantial trauma in my life and lived to tell the tale. And I think what it's given me is a much deeper empathy than I ever could have had I not experienced some multiple really dark,
Mm,
periods in my life. So it's
totally.
like, I don't know. It's like also it's empathy and gratitude. I'm so grateful for having emerged from those experiences alive and well, and also seeing other people struggle and really really on a deep level knowing what it's like to be where they are
Yeah.
because you've been there. And I think that's kind of speaks to what you're saying. But I did want to reference something you said earlier, John, which was the other piece of this for men, because this is a really good trifecta of answering that question, which I thought was like, I don't know if there's even an answer to this, I'll just give it a shot. And you've done really well with that, and that was coming from that witness perspective. And so for someone listening that may not understand what you meant by that, could you elaborate on, because I know what you mean, but
Mm.
what do you mean, like being a witness of your own mind, your own ego, your own personality from a perspective of your higher self? That would be kind of how I describe that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I talk about this, assuming that people know, but they don't. And, masculine spiritual practice throughout the ages has been a recognition of that which never changes. Like if you read Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, he talks a lot about this. Like all great spiritual masters talk about this concept of that which never changes, or it could be the soul, or your consciousness, or the eternal you, or God, whatever you want to call it. That is, in my lexicon, the masculine, that which is always the same, never changing. Right? The feminine is everything that changes all the time. Thoughts, feelings, the world, life. Life is the feminine. Death, masculine, life, feminine, right? Death is an eternal thing that is never changing. Death is death. It's non-existent. So learning to practice that in our own body mind actually trains us to practice it with the feminine. So the more that the deep, and most people do this in a meditative practice, right? So if I sit and I just breathe and I watch my breath, in and out, and the part of myself, let's call it the part of me that never changes, I call it the witness, right? Witness is thought zooming by, right? Or feelings in my body. And I just witness those with equanimity. That's the essence of a lot of masculine spiritual practice. So for a guy who wants to drop more into his masculine, getting more connected to that will work on his body, mind, and his nervous system over the course of months and years. And he'll just feel more still. Like it will be twitchy. His nervous system will start to drop down. And, what'll happen is he'll start to be able to be with the feminine, everything that's being, while also being the witness, not reacting, right? And so most guys don't get that there's a link, right? The reason I have guys meditate is because you train yourself to witness the feminine in you first, then you can bring it out into the world and witness your love having a horrible day or losing her shit or being totally emotional, and you can be the witness. And that allows the feminine to relax, not worrying that you're going to get reactive or you're going to jump in or you're going to,
Dude,
does that
that
help?
is incredible. I never made that correlation at all. That is very enlightening. Because I've been, meditating for many years and doing all kinds of different spiritual practices, and definitely try to live my life most of the time from the perspective of being the one watching this podcast take place
Mm.
and observing my emotions and not allowing them to control me, but to observe them and let them kind of wash over me.
Mm.
Seeing my mind when my mind has a thought that's based in falsehood, whether that be an angry thought about someone, a fearful thought, a self-critical thought, any thought that's not true, right? It's not coming from a higher wisdom. To observe that and not be, a victim to that and not be under control of that. I mean, that's like the goal of my life.
Yeah.
But I never thought of that as building within me the skill to be able to witness that going on in someone else, like in a female partner, for example, and also having that same observing mind, that sort of non-attached, non-reactive approach to the relationship as well. I mean, I do that. I just never realized it was the same thing.
Yeah.
And I never correlated that with masculinity either. That's what's interesting, because I think of my spiritual practices as very feminine for some reason. Like when I'm in that still place meditating, I feel like I'm being very open and receptive to God, and I'm really in a state of allowing, because I'm not being proactive. I'm not like, okay, now I'm going to meditate. I'm going to be the best meditator right now for the next 20 minutes. I'm going to kick ass at this meditation. I'm really like in a place of surrender. So I never correlated that to actually accessing my masculine self, which is that sort of, like a tree of integrity, like that strongest, unmoving, unwavering part of myself that's necessary to bring to a relationship.
Yeah.
Very, very cool correlation. I appreciate that.
Well, this has been going on for millennia. We've been talking about this yin and yang, right? Shiva and Shakti. Like these energies exist in us, they're innate, right? And we just we're putting language on something that's, that's complicated, but we're just trying to have a framework so people can understand it. And it's to me, I think men think that masculine means something that it doesn't. And really what the feminine responds to, and I've seen this now in thousands of practices and hundreds of workshops, what the feminine responds to is stillness and openness. Right? If you can be still but open, like you talked about, that is so nourishing to the feminine nervous system. That is what, now bringing that into everyday life is the trick. But it takes practice, and like anything, we can get better at it. So it's just becoming aware to start, and then going, okay, all right, in this moment, can I feel the part of me that's witnessing? Can I feel this moment that you and I are having stretches out into infinity? And the more that we can feel that, the more still we get, and the more you and I feel it, like, right? Or you and I could say, hey, man, like, we might die after this conversation. This might be the last conversation we ever have. Right? In that moment, you and I get deeper. We get more masculine, because we've acknowledged that which never changes. So I don't want to call it hack, but it's just like a way to, to access that
An
part
access
of
point.
Yeah.
I guess it's sort of like, when I think of Stoicism, I think of that as kind of a masculine energy spirituality, and that's kind of what that approach reminds me of. It's sort of stoic in a way where you're not unemotional or unreceptive, but still just kind of like you have this solid place in the eye of a storm, whether or not that storm's going on within you and your mind and your emotions, or in your counterpart's mind and emotions, right?
Right.
And that's...
Well, if you get too stoic, then you're disconnected. Like, great spiritual practitioners like the Maharishi, man, he was sitting in his own shit, so unattached from life that, in consciousness, that he didn't even notice he had gangrene. Well, that's a little too far on the masculine spectrum.
Right. Was he literally sitting in his own dookie?
Wow. Yeah, literally. In a basement, they found him in a basement, sitting in his own shit, like so enlightened. Completely enlightened, feeling infinity, like in the bliss of feeling infinity. Well, yeah, that's a little extreme, but most guys don't know how to train their nervous system to start there and then add feeling. So the ultimate combination in relationship, right? This is relationship now, is to be able to be still but feel everything.
Okay,
Be,
right, right.
yeah,
Whereas true, like stoicism is like just be still.
just be still. Yeah, and I'll give a fuck. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. But I
Yeah,
don't give a
yeah,
fuck. Yeah.
yeah,
No, this is I care deeply, and I'm still. Right. I
yeah.
care deeply, and I can feel the room I'm in. I can feel you in West Hollywood. I can feel the ocean. I'm in Santa Monica, so the ocean's out. I can feel all that and be still at the same time. And if we can train our nervous system and our body to do that, implications in sex and relating is just really beautiful, very deep.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, dude. There's a couple other avenues I want to go down, but here's what we're gonna do because we're a little over an hour now. I try to
Mm,
keep the episodes close to an
sure,
hour, but
sure.
when I'm vibing with someone and I dig their work like yours, it's tough to stop. But I'm gonna discipline myself. I'm gonna use masculine energy and I'm gonna cut the shit off.
Good for you.
But I definitely want to do a part two down the road with you because I want to
Why
go
not?
more into, next time maybe the woman's perspective because we just gave men like the download, bro.
Right,
I mean,
right.
honestly, there's a lot of really rich stuff for them that's applicable and realistic and is like,
Mm,
I think very meaningful. So thank you so much for that. So
my
as
pleasure.
we come to the end of the episode, I'd like to ask you my closing question, which is 3 parts. So you've taught me a bunch. You've taught the audience tons today. You've been our teacher for lack of a better way to state that. I know no one likes to hear that because they have humility, but you've taught us. So who have been 3 teachers or teachings, philosophies, books, something like that have influenced you that we might be able to go to?
Sure, sure. Well, one of my teachers who I learned a lot of what we talked about today from is a man named David Deida, Deida, and he's written a bunch of books on spirituality and relationship. He's a really beautiful teacher. Chogyam Trungpa, who's a Buddhist teacher. I don't know if you know Pema Chodron, but Chogyam Trungpa was Pema Chodron's teacher, and I have, I consider him a teacher of mine, even though he's dead. Died, he was a drunken scoundrel, but enlightened. So it's
Yeah.
something about that,
Ra-
I have a history in that world. So yeah, I love that.
Ram Dass talks a lot about him on the Ram
Yeah,
Dass podcast. Yeah,
yeah,
he has a
yeah.
lot of great stories about him.
Oh, yeah, and his readings, he was prolific, and his books are now getting recirculated because Pema Chodron's so popular. So yeah, he's beautiful. I'm really into Carlos Castaneda right now, and I'm just I'm more into Don Juan than Carlos Castaneda, but just the simple teachings of the sorcerer, and it's very similar to Tibetan Buddhism, which is the Buddhism that I practice, and so I'm just really digging that. So the book I would recommend there is Journey to Islam, which is a beautiful book for men. Just teachings there are great. Finding God Through Sex by David Deida is fantastic, and then anything by Chogyam Trungpa is beautiful too.
Awesome, man. Thanks. You
Yeah,
didn't get stumped at all. Sometimes people get really tripped out on that question. I'm like, what? Just throw like 3 things out. It's no big deal. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
like,
no, no.
you're going to have to remember it a year later. It's just what's turning you on right now. So great recommendations. We're going to put those in the show notes. Next, I'd like to ask you, where can we find you and your work?
Santa Monica, California, johnwineland.com. So just my name, wine like you drink, land like you live on. I'm sure you'll have a link, and yeah, and just reach out to me. And I have stuff going on all the time. I have a men's program starting in January, and I have workshops, every few months.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely going to check it out. Like I
Yeah,
said, I found you that one video, which we'll of course link to as well. And I was like, oh, this dude's on point. And now we have so many kind of things in common. I'm like, oh, you're definitely going to be seeing my mug in one of your workshops
right on,
coming up
right
very
on,
soon
right
for
on,
sure. Yeah.
right on, right on.
So thanks so much for joining us today, man. It's been an enlightening conversation. I look forward to having another one soon.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. It's been a pleasure, man.